asked this one to my youth group because they asked about this. What do you say to people, especially seeing Discovery Channel and stuff like that, about missing gospels and stuff like that? Is there anything that's been left out of the Bible because they don't know much to know about?
Yeah, let me say two things. First of all, I like the way you put the question. I get the question that way a lot, but you guys, as you start to dig into these things, you're going to start to figure out that, I'm going to give you just a 30-second answer here in just a minute, but you're going to start to figure out that when they say this, what do I say kind of script doesn't work very well, does it? You know, I get these Facebook questions all the time. What should I say when somebody asks me this, what should I say? And they kind of want sort of a telemarketer script. You know, when you say this, then I'll say this, and you say this, and I'll say that. And some of the issues are just too complicated for that to be the case. And often, that's not going to be your problem because you guys can figure out complicated. Often, what's missing in that formula is actually a relationship. Because you're going to, as you have a relationship with people, you're going to get a question from them, and you're going to know them, and you're going to know that that question is just basically a complete smokescreen. It's the woman at the well, and you're just basically going to say, you know what, that's not your question, that's a dumb question, and let's get to what you're really interested in. But you can only do that with your friends. You can't do that with strangers. And so the 30-second answer to that is that, yeah, within about 100 years of the writing of the earliest books of the New Testament, by about the mid-2nd century, so you figure Jesus is born in 6 BC, I'm going to go this way, Jesus is born in 6 BC, he dies around 30, the last books of the New Testament are written around 90, by about 150, these 2nd century Gospels start to crop up, and they are what we call pseudepigraphal, that's a big word, which basically means they are attributed to somebody who didn't actually write them. And so they have apostles' names on them, like the Apocalypse of Peter and the pseudo-epistle of Barnabas and those kind of things. And what I would say, let me not just speak broadly about them. We don't have time, but if we had time, I would say, let's take them one by one and let's ask the questions about historicity, antiquity, and external confirmation. And when you subject them to those, what you find is you find them to be late in the 2nd century, written by people who did not know Jesus, way outside of Palestine, telling a different version of Christianity. And I think that's it. Now, there are a couple of really popular ones that the news media in particular has sort of glommed onto lately, the Gospel of Thomas, so we hear that one a lot. It's late 2nd century. And then also the Judas Gospel, which is also late 2nd century. There's actually, I don't know if you know the whole story, there's a huge controversy. Y'all remember the Judas Gospel? Were y'all watching TV when that thing came on? The National Geographic Society they found this new manuscript, and it supposedly had Judas being friends, and you know, Jesus was like, one of y'all has to betray me to get you to the cross, so Judas, why don't you take one for the team, and God will reward you, and that kind of stuff. And the whole thing turned out to be a complete disaster. The National Geographic Channel, the guy who brought the manuscript to them is now in an Israeli prison for antiquities fraud, and the translation was bad, and they pulled the special, and you know, the whole thing. But just be aware that when you see these specials on the Discovery Channel and the History Channel about the lost Gospels or whatever, understand their primary motivation is not to educate you. Their primary motivation is to sell advertising. And so the more scandalous and controversial they can make it. And also be aware that when somebody comes on and says something on any of those channels, you may not be aware, if you're not studied in these things, you may not understand the scope. When I talk to my students, I call it the Discovery Channel syndrome. Y'all watch the Discovery Channel specials? You know how it goes, right? It's the same pattern every single time. You get this camera, and it's panning across the Jerusalem landscape, right? And you've got authoritative announcer voice comes on. And he basically says whatever the big bombshell is, right? The Gospels were written until way into the 2nd century. And then it cuts to New Testament expert guy, right, sitting in his office. And he basically repeats what disembodied announcer voice guy had said. And it says down at the bottom in big white letters, New Testament expert. What you don't realize, though, from watching that is that, yeah, he's a New Testament expert. But I've seen this on several occasions with a guy named John Dominic Crossan. What you don't realize by watching that is that he is quite literally the only person on planet Earth who believes that's true. That there is not, you know, in other words, if you were to take atheist, hater of Christianity, Professor Bart Ehrman, and sit him on the couch next to you, and sit me on the other side, we would both watch that special, and we both look at John Dominic Crossan and say, yeah, that guy's crazy. And so those are the kinds of things that you don't know, though, necessarily, just watching them, and they present what are often very obscure views as mainstream. And what they're doing is they're taking these gospels that were clearly rejected by the church and have been talked about as rejected for 1,700 years, and they are trying to mainstream them. And it's just, anybody who knows